And Vanessa and Jules Van Thuyne are going to tell us about the experimental test plots that they've been running out in Jules's cornfield off 287. Jules is a third-generation Boulder County farmer who grows alfalfa, pinto beans, corn, sugar beets, wheat, and cattle on thousands of acres near Longmont. He improves his soil with reduced tillage, crop rotations, and interseeding cover crops. Vanessa is the district manager of the Boulder Valley and Longmont Conservation District.
So for the last 2 years, the Conservation District has partnered with Jules on his farms just south of Longmont. He has been very gracious in letting us tinker a bit on his farms. 2021, we had a flood irrigated 22-acre field where we interseeded some cover crops and did some different tillage things. That actually both final reports are linked on our website, longmontcd.org, if you want to go check out all the history of those. But this year in 2022, Jules let us take a little section of his cornfield under the pivot. So we were really interested in some of the water pieces with integrating cover crops in 22 and 44-inch corn row spacings. So we'll just kind of talk through the pictures. And then I did bring some copies of the report. If you guys want to take some hard copies, or like I said, you can look it up on the website. You want to say anything, Jules? Nope. Okay. Jules's farms are in gorgeous locations, and Peyton takes great pictures. You know, we had 4 different corn hybrids that we used. We partnered with 3 different seed companies. We were looking at water use and drought this year too. So we planted some outside of the area where the pivot went. So you can see we planted the corn, then we came back, and Bob Condon up there came and helped us with his drill. So you can see here we had the 44-inch rows where we interseeded cover crops, and then we also had where we just went on the 22-inch rows as well. So these were some soil moisture water sensors that we also partnered with a couple different companies. So these went down several feet deep to get those installed in the field. And then throughout the season, we were able to monitor, the depth of the water and kind of the rooting activity in both sort of the conventional area and then in the cover cropped area to see if we could see any real differences. So they were water sensors and temperature as well. Here is a picture of the cover crops coming up interseeded with the corn. We did learn some things this year. This was year 2 of us kind of tinkering with cover crops. So we went a little heavy on warm season, Sudan grass, and some sorghum, which really competed with the corn in a big way, especially in the 44-inch rows, sort of compounded with a really cold spring. The corn was slow to get out of the ground, and then us tinkering out there with Bob and maybe damaged the corn a little bit early season as well. So the cover crops did really well, better than we had hoped. Not good for the corn yield in the 44-inch rows. So most of the analysis in the report is on the yield analysis on the 22-inch rows. But we did have some other stuff in there, sorghum, Sudan, some radishes and some other cool season broadleafs in there as well. There was some vetch and some other things too. So this is a drone shot of the plot there. So you can see over here is like more of the 44-inch rows. You can see the 22-inch rows, the different hybrids of corn. You can kind of see some differences as those were planted in the pivot track going through there as well. And so it's kind of just a high overview of the plot layout in the field. So we had a field day at the end of August. We made some spots out in the cornfield, and we looked at a couple of different things. We looked at the corn varieties. We talked a little bit about the addition of biologicals that Indigo Ag had provided. We talked about carbon markets. We talked about how the water moves. We talked, the reps from the soil moisture sensor companies came out and talked about their technology. So we had a pretty good turnout out there on Jules's farm at the end of April. Buffalo brand, that was Dennis. He came and talked about cover crops as well. Cover crop was from green cover though. So this was some of the more interesting stuff that we pulled out of this year's demo plot. These soil moisture sensors were installed early on in the season. It's something Jules hadn't really used before. It's something, certainly I hadn't used or Peyton. So it kind of took a good portion of, we didn't really make any decisions based on these soil moisture sensors. It's more been a look back at how the water moved throughout the season. They get kind of complicated. You have to look at them for a while to make sense, but up here, July 3rd, you can see, there was probably an irrigation event. You can it gives you an idea of where the rooting activity is of the corn. So where it's pulling water from, and like here you can see the water went a little bit below perhaps where the rooting activity was. Here,
What's the spacing?
vertical, I think it's 4 inches per line. So here, I don't know off the top of my head if this was an irrigation event or a rain event in July, but you can see the water probably went deeper than the corn roots could really pull out. There's another cross section here from August 4th through August 17th at the end on the bottom one. And you can kind of see the software sort of tells you up here in this green, you're sort of in the optimal depth of water applied. In the red, it didn't quite get deep enough for the corn, and here in the blue, it got below where the corn roots were able to pull it out. Peyton is way better explaining this stuff, but and it also kind of shows different stages of the corn, like when it's really pulling more water out of the soil. Does that make any sense, or does anybody have anything to add to that? I don't know, Jules, what would you?
Well, for me, probably one of the most interesting parts of the plot this year is the soil moisture probes, and a lot to be learned. At this particular farm sub-irrigates pretty well, so it doesn't take quite as much water as some of the other farms I farmed. But to see this data and know that we were pretty spot on irrigation made a big difference. And I do wish Pete was here to explain it, because it really is pretty fascinating.
So the monitor is telling you
What's available.
Yeah. So the depth that the water is going, and its approximation of where the roots are pulling it back up.
So are you using the water monitors to determine when you were running your sprinkler?
We've kind of got into that more toward the end of the season, which was more higher usage anyway. And normally I run my pivots between 4 and 5 tenths is what we put on. So I think we were getting enough on at the time to keep things going. And you can put on around 0.4 inches to 5 inches in about less than 2 days, what it takes to revolutionize it. Revolve the pivot around, so that's kind of the speed we were operating on. But it was keeping up.
And what was your plant population on your farm?
33,000 was the goal.
33, 34 on the 22-inch row, and actually double that on the
Supposed to be.
Yeah.
We had some planting things that didn't go perfectly.
And soil type? What soil type?
Oh, it's a clay loam on the light side.
Okay, like I said, we did some, harvest. We did collect yield samples, soil moisture tested the seed as well. So all those results, like I said, I have some copies here, so you guys want to take a copy of the results. Overall, the 44-inch rows did not yield well whatsoever with the addition of the cover crop that took over. So we definitely learned something there. The 22-inch rows did okay. There's some analysis in there about soil temperature under cover crops and outside of cover crops. It's pretty interesting how hot the soil surface and just below is as well. When you're thinking about soil health and soil life. Yeah, Larry.
Do you think you'd be better off with more like nitrogen fixation, like your Vespediza and some beans or something like that instead of sorghum?
Yeah, I think anything lower growing cool season would be better options. And we had more of that the prior year, and it did much better in the corn situation.
What is in the top left corner there? What is that What's on your cat saying?
Millet.
Yeah, millet. I think it's millet, the sorghum and the millet.
Okay,
Mhm. This is a sun hemp, the yellow flower. You want to add those?
I think I'd encourage everybody to take a copy of it because I think the results are very interesting, very telling. I think. So we did have 3 different seed companies involved in it. And, they promoted it very well. Vanessa and Peyton did a great job on this. We supplied the farm and the machinery and the water, but they basically did the input. So
Jules, did it harvest pretty clean or was it?
yeah, I think so. Considering.
Can you see the data live from the sensors or you have to download them manually? How is the information?
It's like,
Is it live? We can do all of that.
it's web host.
Yeah, I mean, it's on a website, so I think you probably could look at it like every day if you wanted to, every 15, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It's not cheap either, like that soil moisture sensor stuff, like they kind of donated a lot to this, but it's, well, we paid for some of it too, but you know, it's up in the thousands of dollars for the,
It depends,
Yeah.
there's different companies out.
Oh,
Some of them
certainly.
You can go are cheaper and you go out with it. I don't know how yours works. Ours were off of cell towers. We did a cell tower.
yeah, these were cellular. Hey, did you have a
Keith.
handle?
Yeah, last year you had the plot, but I think you had wheat in it this year, Jules. Was there a difference in the wheat where the cover crop was compared to where you did the 22-inch row?
You mean from last year's plot?
Yeah, from last year.
You know, I didn't see anything significant, Pete. I mean, I thought last year's, for me, the plot was almost more interesting because we had a no-till, we had a minimum till, and then we had a conventional till. And I didn't see a huge difference really.
I'm just kind of curious how the cover crop would affect the next year.
Yeah.
Good question.
Looking at the process, you didn't really see it.
No, I didn't either.
I mean, then we didn't. Couldn't tell.
I didn't know if it was fun, but
Didn't we have a drought tolerance for this?
We did,
yeah.
Part of the planting here, we did have a drought tolerant hybrid as part of the plot. The data's in there too, so. I think last year the drought tolerant topped the plot.
I think so. I mean, there wasn't, I was under the pivot, there wasn't a lot of drought going on.
No.
Yeah.
What's the standard, row spacing for corn? Is 22 inches,
Most guys are on 30. But
30?
when I grew sugar beets, I grew 22-inch sugar beets, so I went 22-inch corn rows as well. We end up planting a little heavier on 22s because the spacing is a little wider. And so we feel like we get away with it. But I've switched over probably at least 15 years ago, and I've been very, very okay with it. No regrets. When I did sugar beets, I had a neighbor, we had a 20-acre field of beets. He planted half 22s and I used 30. And the 22s out yielded 3 tons the acre. So I thought it was worth the cost to switch everything over, and then I went to corn. So it's worked out. So most guys are on 30s.
On this particular crop this year, how did you manage your fertilizer? Was it multi-pass or was it?
Like the previous year was sugar beets. We soil sample, but it was just one pass post or pre-emerge, but it was just one application. About 200 pounds of N, and I think about 20 pounds box.
How deep?
We just put it on top, incorporated it 2 inches.
We did do some tissue testing on the corn during the season too, to see if the cover crop was, going to cause a problem with the nutrients on the corn, and we really didn't see any deficiencies throughout the season. So it
And
wasn't-
the corn overall did pretty well.
So you didn't put fertilizer in row, you the broadcast?
Yeah.
You do any fertilizer?
Sometimes,
I just want to know.
and sometimes put through the pivot as well.
Yeah.
Is your corn harvester? Is it harder than a cover crop or that's still left in the time?
Jason can answer. He was like.
It went right through, it was real tall, that sorghum grew, it grew up over. And so it was a little tricky to figure out where the roads were. Sorghum. But it didn't plug up or give any problems. I mean,
It went through.
You just had
You had to pay attention where you're at. For sure.
Great. If you did too.
No, because the corn is so much bigger.
Yeah.
So all that stuff went right through it. It didn't give us any problems. It's just a little bit tricky to keep the road. It's a sort of quite a bit taller than before. So the cover crop and everything.
Yeah, and this was harvested for grain, obviously. So this year it was, I guess it was last year too. And yeah, so the cover crop, just whatever came out the back of the combine just stayed and then.
And we had it way wet.
Yeah.
So you preceded the cover crop again.
Yes, perhaps.
Right.
About to find out this spring.
What are you gonna follow this year?
Probably back to corn. I wanted to go to fall wheat, but we didn't get corn stalk bales off fast enough, so. That was the plan. Afraid we're gonna have.
You raise it.
No. Same situation Bob is, too close to the highway.
What's cover crop? It's left over in there.
I hope so.
Well, you bailed, did you bail?
We built the corn stalk, so most of the cover crop was out with corn stalk bales. There's not a ton left there. And I think by spring it.
Strip hill. That's what we did before we planted here too. With sugar beet, but and the sugar beets I ran out, they were on 30-inch rows, so we stripped hill on two. So it kind of broke it up too.
So we'll have to see what happens this year. I don't know. We haven't even talked about it. Let's see.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jules.
Well, thank you guys very much.